I went to Smith College. I graduated in 1971. It was the height of the feminist movement. The issue of women in Judaism was very troublesome to me. So when I came to Crown Heights to study, and the years after, this was a very big concern for me. One of the most profound things that I learned was the role of women in Hasidic philosophy and Kabbalah, through the Rebbe's sichas and through learning there.
In der alle Mitzvahs, was Noshim und Bonne seine Mechuye, seine Zereche, Scheiches und sie davon lernen. Der Halloch ist was sein in der Mitzvah verbunden. Noshim und Bonne sollen lernen Pnimis Ateira, Teiris Achassidus. Wie bald Adose der Derech, La Abose oder Jirosne, was Chiyuvon is a tree of Tmidi, und bechol echot sais chorim, und seine keves.
I started to write articles on this to help me work out the ideas. My first one was called The Jewish Woman 3 Steps Behind with a question mark. And I sent it in to the editor of a journal called Yiddish Shehem, The Jewish Home, which was put out by Neshei Chabad, the Jewish Women's Organization of Crown Heights. At that time, my uncle, who was very, very dear to me, was like a grandfather, got very, very ill. I sent in the essay to the woman editor, and at the same time, about a few weeks later, I wrote in to the Rebbe for a blessing for the recovery of my uncle. And right away, I got an answer from the Rebbe's secretary that the Rebbe would pray for my uncle's recovery. And then another very interesting line. I enjoyed your article in the forthcoming Yiddish Shehem. I thought, how did the Rebbe know that I wrote an article in the Yiddish Shehem about Judaism and feminism and that he enjoyed it? So the editor told me that the Rebbe had such a concern for women and for their activities, and so wanted to encourage them, that after she edited all the articles, he also went over them and edited them himself. So as a favor to me, she gave me back these manuscripts. Very interesting additions and subtractions that he made. I was astonished. I thought, how did he have the time to do this?
So my husband's very happy to report to the Rebbe that he has this wonderful shir in Riverdale. Doe's finished with his spiel about his shir. The Rebbe says, Doe, what do the women do during that time? So my husband says, oh, they prepare a wonderful Sudash sheet, a whole meal. And the Rebbe says, Doe, that's not enough. The women need to learn too. So my husband comes home and he says to me, the Rebbe says you should teach a shir. I said, Dov, what are you talking about? I'm a professional artist. Once upon a time, I taught Hebrew school. Teach a shir? I'm not prepared to teach a shir. Dov says, the Rebbe says you really should teach a shir. You know, a shir for women in Riverdale, a shir in Mishnah, that would be nice.
Wenn gehe zu lernen und wissen allein mit eigenem Sechel verstehen, was Teile will und was Teile verleiht und auf was Teile gibt Keach, sagt man, als geworden Minna Yisrael Teile gehen, als von dort zu dort und jeder dort von Jahr zu Jahr und im Jahr allein von Zeit zu Zeit kommt zu bei Frauen und bei Mädchen, bei der Chassen viele, bis viele bei dort kleinen Mädchen, bei jeder von sie allein kommt zu, in Wissen, was in Torah steht.
So I said, all right, you prepare me, go over the Mishnah with me, and I'll try. After I started it in a private fashion, the rabbi of the Riverdale Jewish Center, which is the largest Orthodox synagogue in Riverdale, called and heard that I had been teaching a shiur to women, and he asked me to do it in the Mascaret of the synagogue. And we kept this study group going for 25 years.
שקראתי גם כמעט התמסת, לא בשביל ההצלחה ללכת מחייב ולחויב, ולהריס מחייב בשביל כל בני המשפחה, גם הנכדים.
It is not just that the Rebbe was responsible for these women learning Mishnah with me. It was that he was essentially responsible for me coming to a much higher level of Jewish learning that I would not have had otherwise.
He said in a very interesting talk he gave in 1990 on Lag BaOmer that what is the reason that the desire of women to learn came out now in our generation and not in earlier generations? Every generation has its revelation that's necessary for it. And we get further and further from Mount Sinai. The world is very dark. But he also points out you go further and further from Sinai, but you get closer and closer to Mashiach, to redemption. The closer you get, you start to get a little taste of it.
Very narrow on the inside.
In the Zchut of the righteous women, the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. Rebbe would always quote that. I'd like to give the Rebbe a copy of my book that I just published because I wrote and I dedicated it to the Rebbe here. It's a critique of, I'm telling my story, but he related to every woman in her way. Women have these tremendous spiritual and redemptive powers, and he harnessed them.
And that's because the light from inside the temple emanated out.
This production is made possible through the generosity of the members of the GEM Foundation.
Mehrere Sachen verbunden mit jüdischen Yom Tevim. Sicher, wenn ich gehe zu Matten Torah, es Afal Pi, heute das Chaderste Chiber, von Jahr zu Jahr, hat man sich angesagt, als Bechol Jem, Iyu Binecha, Kachadoshim, wo das macht noch tiefer und noch lebendiger und noch freilicher und jüdischer. In Kabbalah Satel in dem Jahr, wie bald am Hotschen, als sehr viel Mal mit Kabel gewendete Torah, ist Adrabe bei Jiden und Niedigkeit, als kommt zu noch ein Jahr, ist das Niederfahren, ist durch den, wird die Sache noch mehr beneid und noch mehr jung und noch mehr angefrischt und noch mehr freilicher und noch mehr tiefer und breiter auf dem ganzen Jahr. Und das verrennt verteidigt, was mich stellt sich. Einzige Zeiten lernen sich frühen und nicht möglich, bis kleine möglich, Chalokim in Torah, was einmal flecken sich verlassen, aber wie bald, als weder von der Mann oder der ältere Bruder oder der Bruder Bechlal, ist genug, als die Frau oder der Mädel soll jetzt sein, und bisher sie das darf man fragen, wenn sie fragen, oder beim älteren Bruder, oder beim Mann, ich habe es mit Seche gewendet, es wird als mehr zugegeben. In Torah ist Seche geworden, der Minak Yisrael Torah hier, als Frau in Heintige Deres, lernen a Sach mehr Torah, wenn geht zum Mekayim sein, was steht in Torah, seien alle jüdische Frauen gewähren koschere Frauen, und dann Mekayim gewähren alle jüdische Mitzvahs, in alle Deres, wie Rabbi in der Friedliche Deres. Also gewähren Menschen zum Znam, Shabes Amigdash Hoya Kayim, hat noch Mekayim gewähren mit Nebellebendigkeit, weil sie gewähren frisch, das, was man gesehen, bis man Shabes Amigdash Hoya Kayim. Wenn gehe aber zu lernen Teile und wissen allein mit eigenem Sechel verstehen, was Teile will und was Teile verleiht und auf was Teile gibt Keach, sagt man, dass geworden Minhag Yisrael Teile hier, als von dort zu dort und jeder dort von Jahr zu Jahr und im Jahr allein von Zeit zu Zeit kommt zu bei Frauen und bei Mädchen, Vaterhassen a viele, bis a viele bei gar kleine Mädchen, als bei jedem von sie allein kommt zu, in Wissen, was in Teile steht, bis und verstehen allein echt, was in Teile steht, bis wann es kann sein, einmal ein Fall, als der Mann oder der ältere Bruder darf fragen bei der Frau, oder bei der Schwester, was sagt in Zusammenhang mit der bestimmten Sache, was hat getroffen als eine neue Sache beim Mann oder beim älteren Bruder, und wie der Nisida Reino, wie der Rebbe der Schwert, der Ziltechit in seine Sichreine ist, als gewähnt passieren, wo seine gegangen Rabbonim und Droschim gesprochen ist, und mit Männern, und beschaß dann noch gekommen unvorsehene Geschehnisse, gewähnt in Schabbos, und sie dort Apostel geworden der Ariel, bemädelt geworden die Scheibe, was soll man tun mit den Sachen, was man gehabt, in die Kirche, was man das alles genommen, in der koscheren Neffen, wie bald der Ariel ist gewähnt nach koschere Frier, und danach ist sich hereingemischt, zur seitige Sache, und der Ariel wie Touristen geworden, die Strick, bemädelt geworden ist Ariel, hat uns so gedacht, aufstellen und fragen die Scheile, was tut man, bis an Nähe wird Bottel und man hat in der Kirche verschiedene Sachen und erzählt der Schwer in seine Sichrenis, was hat das geheißen, oder wo man Farsim sei. Zu wem hat man sich gewendet und hat gewusst, in der die Scheile ist als ewig zwischen die, was seine Gedanken in der Schabbesdicken spaziert. Die sehr gewähnt früh, aber was gewähnt Tero, ist das sehr gewusst dem Entführer von der Scheide, wie bald das am Unfall ist, genau seine Sache.
With materials from the Living Archive.
Okay, Grach, I want to share with you a incredible story.
Rabbi, there's an echo. An
echo?
Yeah.
Why is there an echo? Is it my phone, maybe? Let's see. Not sure why there's an echo. Maybe I should use my phone instead of my computer, maybe better. What?
Yeah, probably that would help.
Okay. Okay, good luck. Network.
Maybe if you turn it off on the computer.
All right. So, story to share with you tonight is actually was actually a story that Ariel Tzadik, who just passed away in Miron, was witness to. and he shared the story himself. And he wasn't someone who liked to speak. He didn't like the limelight of talking at all. But since he personally witnessed this story, so he decided he has to share it, because if Hashem caused him to see the story, he felt that he must share the story. Because why, as Baal Shem Tov says, whatever you see or hear is a message from Hashem. And since it's such an incredible story, so Rabbi Ariel Tzadik, Alav Shalom, who just passed away with all the Karbonis, Achon al-Islan, Alag Beimer and Miron, so he shared the story himself, and wanted to dedicate this to his memory and to all those who passed away. And he studied in the Tzemach Tzedek's koil for some time. Before that, he was a student in yeshiva in 770. He was very much very diligent, and he became close to Chassidus and joined the yeshiva. But although he was studying in the yeshiva, he wasn't, and the boys knew who he was, but they didn't really get to know him because he was very much to himself. He was a bit of an introvert. And what happened was that it was actually it was a Sima Rambam every so often in 770, whenever there.
What happened? There's silence here. What's happening?
Sorry about that. He has to share this story with everyone because it's just Hashem arranged him to know the story. He has to share the story. And so he got up at the Sima Rambam and he said the following story. He said that he and his three brothers and his father have a carpet store in Manhattan. And this guy shows up one day to the carpet store, and he looks like an Italian, comes with a Mercedes 1989, and he just looks like he's not part of the, not Jewish at all. He buys a couple of carpets, and after he buys the carpets, he's transfixed on this picture of the Rebbe in the store. So Rav Ariel said he wasn't so surprised by this because the Rebbe's picture is something which is very impressionable. But the guy was looking at this and looking at this, and he until he turned to me and he says, "Do you know who that is?" And I asked him if he's Jewish. I saw that there was a tear in his eye. So I realized there's something going on with this guy, and the Rebbe is something. Turns out this guy is from Staten Island, and not religious at all. But he and his wife are blessed with a child, Roberto, and they gave Roberto the best education that they could. He tells Rabbi Ariel, he says to him that I gave him all I could, and when he turned 18 years old, my dream was that he would join me in my business and participate in the business. He had a large upholstery business in Staten Island. I wanted him to join me, but I wanted him to first go to Chicago to go to a business management school. So we sent Roberto to the school. We got him a nice car, and we got him a nice apartment. And after he's there for quite some time, we gave him a lot of money. We discover that Roberto isn't really studying. He's become unfortunately addicted to drugs. So we called him to come home right away, and my wife poured her heart out to him. Please, you have to leave this. This isn't good for you. And he promised he would leave it. but he's addicted. So he promised he was going to leave, but he kept on going back to the drugs. And another promise, and they begged him to leave the group he was in and to leave the friends he had made with who were not really his friends. But back and forth again and again, he kept on going back to the drugs. And he after some time, we decided we have to take a drastic step and do things Italian style. Originally, their family is from Italy. And the next time he came to the house, I sat him down. I said to him, the days of the nice days are over. I said, from now on, I cannot give you another cent, another penny, until you could prove you actually left the drugs. I'm not going to pay for, and if I'm not going to give another penny, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to cut off the payment for your apartment, and I'm going to take back the car keys. So Roberto is very insulted. As soon as I said the words car keys, he gets up, he slams the car keys down onto the table, and he slams the door, and he says, "Keep the car keys." He leaves. And we thought that he'll come back because he wasn't used to living by himself, he's not used to supporting himself, doesn't have any means of supporting himself. And especially he's so addicted to drugs, he needs money to keep up his addiction. We will sure he'll come back to us and beg take him back. But nothing happened. Weeks passed and weeks passed, he never called us. I hired a private investigator, didn't help. So what I ended up doing was, I ended up paying to have his face on milk cartons in New York, so that anyone who has any information about him should put this to call the police. And it wasn't easy to get this his picture on the milk cartons. It had to bribe the owner to let us pay for the ad, because apparently there was a line that people wanted to put to the very same thing that we did. Anyways, I got his face on the milk cartons, and no one called us. The private investigator couldn't find anything out either. So the Jewish thing inside of me started to bother me and tell me I should go to a shul. So I went to a shul, and I go to the shul, and inside the shul there was a pamphlet about Shabbos candles. So, and it was put out by Chabad Youth Organization in New York, and had some numbers there. So I called up the number, and I told them what's going on in my life, and I asked them if they could perhaps say a blessing for my son in their synagogue. So whoever answered the phone said, "You need a blessing for the Rebbe, for your son. You should go to the Rebbe." So I don't really know what they were talking about, but okay, let's do that. So they took my number, and they said they'll try to arrange for me and my wife to see the Rebbe. And they called back, and they said in 8 days, we will be able to see the Rebbe in 770, Rebbe's shul, at midnight. So it was a little bit of a weird thing, but okay, we'll do anything for our child. And we had no other choice. And my wife's health actually deteriorated because she was so worried about our son. And so, of course, we agreed to do anything we could. We come to 770. We come to Rebbe's shul. And we realize, we walk in, that midnight isn't the time. Midnight came and went, and we had to wait for a longer time to see the Rebbe. And many people in front of us, and we're waiting and waiting to see the Rebbe. Finally, our turn arrives. My wife and I go into the Rebbe, and I tell the Rebbe about Roberto. I want to see Roberto. I want Roberto to come home. And I tell her what's going on, and the Rebbe answers immediately, "Amen, very soon." So the way the Rebbe said that, somehow I knew this was real, and it touched me. And I was so overwhelmed because I knew what the Rebbe said was real. I said, "Thank you, Rabino," and I turned around, and my wife and I left. As soon as we left, my wife was like, "We were waiting for hours. We came at midnight, and that's all. And you just wanted to hear 2 words from him? That's why we came? You're crazy." I said, "Listen, I'm telling you, whatever it is has been solved." We should go back to the car. car will not start. Whatever we try, it's late at night, car's not going to start. And we had to take the subway. Across the street from 770 is the subway. Go down in the subway. And we walk into the subway, and as many panhandlers are there, we see someone who's screaming out, got a quarter, got a quarter. And we realized that's our son. And we realized also that's why the milk cartons weren't helpful at all, because he looked a total mess. He didn't look like our son anymore. He was in the street, and he was hungry, and he looked terrible. So we said, Roberto, and he responded to us, and I hugged him, and I kissed him, and we hugged, and we cried on each other's shoulders, and I took him back home, and Baruch Hashem, he was able to begin his life again. And that's why he's saying this story to Ariel Tzadik. He says, and that's why I ask you, do you really know who this is? You've seen his picture, you've seen him in person, but do you know who this is? That's the story that Rabbi Ariel Tzadik shared, and may this story be Le'ilin Nishmasei and schus for him in B'karav Mamish. We should actually know who this is, becoming Mashiach B'karav Mamish. Have a good Vach, everyone. Gvach Yehuda, Gvach Charles, Gvach Rabbi.
Amen.